Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Pick n Pay, not in the cellar. We seem to be spending quite a lot of time escaping the cellar at the moment, instead of one of my favourite restaurants. This is David Higgs's Saint, his fun spin on the world of Italian. It's a beautiful restaurant with food to match, and it's somewhere I find myself spending rather a lot of time. But not to sample the menu today, at least not yet. That'll happen a little later on. Instead, I'm meeting up with some people who become quite good friends of mine. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was wandering through the Elgin Valley as part of the Absa Cape Epic and got hopelessly lost and arrived asking for directions to drink some nice wine and got a rather forlorn look, and a gentleman asked me if I wouldn't try his wine because he thought his wine was rather nice. I've discovered that is well the case, and I've been drinking it very happily ever since. It is Team Wallace and Paul and Nicky. Lovely to see you. Welcome to Johannesburg.
It's great to be here. We always love Joburg. So.
It's a little noisier, a little busier than your quiet part of the world. Not nearly as beautiful though. You do live, Paul, in an absolutely delightful little corner of South Africa.
Well, we're very pleased to see that Joburg is greening up. I think it's had rain the last 2 or 3 days, and all of a sudden we can see a difference.
Well, welcome to it. It's lovely to have you up here, not just to catch up, but also to taste some of the new wine, and I'm looking forward to doing that in just a moment. But before we do that, a little bit of history. The Paul Wallace wine business, you've got a lot of wine heritage. How did you go from your old wine life to the wine life you have now?
I think we're actually living our dream at the moment. We bought our vineyard 15 years ago. It was a rundown apple farm, and we've created it into what we think is a very good wine producing farm in a very good wine producing area. A little bit of background who we are. Yes, we do have quite a lot of wine in our veins and arteries. Nicky is actually, she was the wine buyer for Woolworths when we got married some 32 years ago. And funnily enough, her great grandfather was Cedric, as in Cedric's Old Brown Sherry.
Aha.
Yeah, I've had 40 years in the industry. I'm a viticulturist, and I was with Stellenbosch Farmers Winery for 17 years, been a freelance viticulturist since. And now, as I say, we are living our dream. It's a new brand, and we've really been serious about the brand since basically 2013. And Johannesburg seems to be our market. We actually come up here every 6 weeks to visit the market, and Gauteng seems to really enjoy our wines.
Well, we certainly do. Nicky, you've got a range. I know we're missing the Crackerjack, which I do love, but the 5 we've got here, just give us a very quick introduction before we start tasting.
Right, the two sort of linchpins of it are our Little Flirt Sauvignon Blanc and our Black Dog Malbec. So the Little Flirt Sauvignon Blanc is exactly what the name would suggest. You'll notice they actually all have a name, and that's to give them a personality. I hate this. This is my Sauvignon Blanc, and its alcohol is 13%. That's very boring, and it doesn't engage with people at all. So they have a name for the personality, and as I said, Little Flirt, it is just charming, delightful. Drink it by the bucket load with summer coming up. The Black Dog Malbec we stumbled into quite by chance, and we'll give you that story when we taste through the wines, but we were one of the first to do a Malbec, and one of the few cool climate Malbecs in South Africa. So those, as I said, are the linchpins, and more recent additions are the Pinot Noir. Very recent addition is the Chardonnay. This is our 2018, which has just been released to trade in Joburg. And then, of course, my personal favorite, the one I claim that's named after me, the Nix, because I'm particularly sweet, like the wine. Or my children will say it's the Sticky Nicky, because I'm also known to be feisty. That's essentially the range.
Is the Little Flirt not also possibly named after her there, Paul?
Nicky, these are all Nicky's names. She's come out with all these names, so who the Little Flirt is, that can be up for discussion.
All right, well, let's try it out. This is the first of them. This is the Little Flirt Sauvignon Blanc. Not just wine heritage here, there's also rugby heritage. If you know the brothers Van Zyl, Chris Van Zyl, very, very famous, captain of Western Province. Anton Van Zyl, nowhere near as famous, and currently working as a security guard at Dimension Data. They are nephews of the Wallace family, but far more important as offspring are these, and the Little Flirt is the first of them. Farmer Paul, what am I tasting here?
Right. being cool climate, Elgin, we harvest our Sauvignon Blanc fully ripe, and by harvesting fully ripe, we get the whole spectrum of the Sauvignon Blanc characteristics, from gooseberries, tropical fruit, green figs, lychees, pineapple, you name it. And I think we are tired, or maybe the consumer is tired, of the green, acidic Sauvignon Blancs. And I think that is basically one of the reasons is that Sauvignon Blanc is grown in some areas that it shouldn't be grown. And that's why cool climate Sauvignon is definitely in, as we can see in this wine here.
All right, well, let's give it a go. And already on the nose, you're getting a lovely range of nice, big, ripe fruit.
It's interesting how often people also say they can taste the apples in the wine. And given that it was an old apple farm, I think you can pick up some of those lovely late harvested apple profile features as well.
There's definitely the ghost of apple on the palate. Oh, it's the light apple juice colour to it as well.
What I like about this wine is the 2018, but look at the color, it's still green and it's still fresh for a 2018.
Yeah.
Just shows cool climate matures so well.
Would you keep this a little longer?
It'll get better. I actually think it's very consumable right now as it is.
As do I.
Yep. Good.
All right, well, we're off to a good start. I'm not surprised because I've had this particular wine on a number of occasions. I haven't, though, had the next wine. So let's move on from the Sauvignon Blanc and have a crack at this new Chardonnay.
This is our Reflection Chardonnay, a little bit more serious than our Sauvignon Blanc, hence a little bit more gravitas in the name. But our Chardonnay vineyard is actually at the bottom of a slope and ends at our dam in front of our house. And the reflection of the vineyards in the early morning and the evening is absolutely breathtaking. So that's where the name for this wine comes from.
Now, the key question with Chardonnay, how much wood is there in this?
It has wood. It must have wood. I always think Chardonnay as a grape per se is fairly neutral, and I think it benefits from wooding, but the key is you've got to get the wooding right.
Yeah.
So we've done quite a lot of research, a lot of tasting research as well, and we've actually selected barrels that are sourced from Burgundian coopers, and even go as far as specifying forests in Burgundy to try and be true to the spiritual home of Chardonnay.
Complementing some Elgin Chardonnay with a little Burgundian wood. And it's the kind of story I love, because what you're doing is you're taking something French and you're improving it with something South African, which I love. We do that quite often in the wine industry.
We're never going to be a French wine. We need to be true to ourselves. And I think the thing about Elgin wines is this beautiful fruit that always just shines out of your glass. So, yes.
Getting back to the wooding, 20% is new wood, and that's actually in 500-litre barrels. And we wood this wine for 9 months.
Okay.
Your Elgin profile on Chardonnay is very much lemons and limes, a citrus profile, supported by the wood, and then possibly embellished by a bit of wine geek speak malolactic fermentation. And that process of converting your malic acid into your lactic acid is what actually gives wine its creaminess or its butteriness. For our purposes, we don't want the wine too buttery, but we wanted a touch of creaminess. So there's only a portion of the wine that's gone through that process. And I think when you taste this, you'll pick up the lemons and limes, and you'll pick up a lemon curd, which is a function of that malolactic.
Elgin has definitely become the Chardonnay area at the moment, and we have an annual Chardonnay colloquium, which we held 2 weeks ago, and once again very successful. And that is when we compare Elgin Chardonnays to those of the best in the world. And I'm not afraid, we can hold our heads up pretty high when it comes to comparing our wines to the overseas Chardonnays.
Oh, you got people like Richard Kershaw who are just extraordinary, and you guys fitting into a similar space based on this. Again, I was supposed to be at that colloquium, sadly couldn't make it. My apologies once again, but hopefully I'll squeeze it in for next year. And if you're making wine like this, it'll be hard to hold me back. Now, this is the very first Chardonnay you've made?
The third one, but
Third
the first in any kind of commercial quantity. The first 2 years were just literally playing to find our sense of style that we wanted, where we wanted to actually progress with the wine. So,
And if you want a sense of just how committed Nicky is to this business, she tastes every single one of these wines every single day, morning and afternoon. That's the kind of professionalism we just don't see enough of in our wine industry. All right, white's done. Really nice start. We've got one of my favourite grapes, the grape which I really liked out of Elgin. What's your Pinot Noir?
winemaker's actually called Pinot Noir the heartbreak grape. It's tricky. It's very tricky in your vineyard, and it's tricky in your cellar. It's a tiny little bunch, tight little berries, susceptible to disease, thin skins, first to ripen. The birds go crazy for it. They love it. Those are the challenges in the vineyard. And in the cellar, it's one of those, like my grandmother would have said, soos 'n vrou vol vimmies. It's one of those, don't touch me. You've got to let it make itself. It really doesn't like to be squeezed, pumped, pushed around. It's just let it be true to itself.
All right,
So let's taste and
give
see.
it a crack. What am I getting from this, Paul?
Cherries, 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 all the way. And to me, it's a lovely drinking Pinot Noir, uncomplicated. And I firmly believe that this style of Pinot will get non-Pinot consumers to start enjoying Pinot Noir. Yeah, the 2015, this is the 2017, the 2015 won the Old Mutual Trophy for the best Pinot Noir in the Old Mutual competition. And that took us from zero to hero overnight, because that was only our third vintage of Pinot Noir. Since then, nobody has won that award or the trophy, so we are still the reigning champions. And prior to that, for 5 years, that trophy hadn't been handed out, because according to the judges, there wasn't a Pinot Noir good enough.
You've obviously produced a very worthy contender, and this is evidence of exactly that. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm a Pinot Noir fan. I struggle, as regular viewers will know, I struggle with the fact that my Philistine of a wife doesn't drink Pinot Noir. Maybe this will nudge you in the right direction. What she does drink, though, and usually out of the bottle if I don't get a glass to her fast enough, is the wine that we're going to try next. And the next one for me is the signature of Paul Wallace Wines. It's one of the few examples in South Africa of a Malbec that gets it right. So while I send this your way, just before we find out the story of the Black Dogs, it's a lovely story. For me, Malbec's got a really special place, because the first holiday I ever did properly with my now wife Dimitra was to South America. I did some work in Mendoza with Wine Magazine, and Vines of Mendoza and Wines of Argentina were very good at helping me out. They took me to a number of bodegas, and it was such a lesson in the art of making Malbec. And art is a term thrown around a little, but it's really appropriate for what they do in Malbec, with Malbec in Mendoza, because they pick the different grapes, they produce different vineyards into the same bottle of Malbec. They spend so much time, so much care, which they need to, because this, as you'll know better than most, is not the easiest of grapes to manage, especially in South Africa.
Well, interesting that you mentioned that, because on our vineyard, we have 3 blocks of Malbec. All 3 have different treatments, as well as having different row direction. And maybe that's what gives the complexity to our wine, remembering that we are the only Malbec in a cool area in South Africa. Normally they're in the hotter areas, being Wellington, Achterpaal, Swartland.
A bit more Mendoza-ish, but you'll see even in Argentina they go up into the slopes of the Andes and down Uco Valley, and even as far south as Patagonia. So if I had to try and classify it, we're more on the Uco Valley style than a Mendoza style.
Which also does Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Pinot Noir. It's one of those
good
areas.
red wine territory.
Yeah.
Well, open it up there, and as you do, we can maybe get the story of this famous canine that gives this wine its name.
Well, Malbec is the antithesis, the exact opposite to Pinot Noir. So Malbec is extremely generous. It's a big bunch, it's fairly big berries, it's a loose bunch, and it gives of its colour, unlike Pinot Noir. So winemakers actually refer to Malbec as the black wine. When you see it in the hopper or being crushed, it's black skins, black juice. So we wanted to bring the black into the name, because of that. And then when we bought the farm, we had this beautiful little Labrador Rottweiler puppy called Jake, who was Paul's shadow for 15 years and has walked the journey with us. Sadly, we had to put him down last year, but we have Becky, a black Labrador, if you get the Malbec Becky in her name, and we recently have Angus to continue the tradition.
As you can hear, the names are all Nicky's. Even the dogs are named by Nicky.
Well, I think it's a wonderful tribute to your old friend, because this wine I've now had over the last 3 or 4 vintages, and I drank it, I have to be honest, I drank it a little suspiciously the first time because I'd had such good Malbec in Argentina, and I'd really struggled to find anything that came close in South Africa. Not for want of trying, but the conditions just weren't there. And I think it's where you guys are, coupled with obviously the expertise and passion, that has created a Malbec that can stand up with the better ones that I've had from Argentina. So this is the new vintage. I have extremely high expectations. I shall walk out of the restaurant if they're not met. But let's give it a go and see how the newest version of the Black Dog holds up.
Well, if 2015 was considered as a vintage year, 2017 in South Africa has also been a great vintage year. And I think this is typical of the 2017 reds.
Yeah, we're starting to see really good 2017 reds from Elgin particularly.
Yeah.
It was the start of those sort of lean water years in the Cape. So we didn't have a drought at all, but we certainly had less rain. And I think what you see is a bit more intensity coming through in the wines now.
All right, well, I think I've got some Christmas orders to place on this.
Yeah, I think it's got a lovely combination of black fruits and red plums in this.
Just a
little bit of
glorious
exotic
colour as well.
intrigue. And of course, in Argentina, you would drink Malbec and eat beef. So our suggestion is you have a fantastic steak.
Not a
with this.
difficult sell really in South Africa, steak and red wine. So if you haven't tried this one, I really do recommend it. It's been my pick of the Wallace collection for some time, and as good as the others are, it remains exactly that. Although it might have some final competition, because we've got one more wine to try out, and this is the one named after the latest member of the old brown sherry empire, and that is the next. And so in closing, a style of wine that I firmly believe we are still not doing enough to celebrate and to enjoy in South Africa. I'll often bring out a bottle after dinner, some sweet wine, some dessert wine, some Noble Late Harvest, and you can see people looking at it rather hesitantly. And then you give them some cheese and you pour half a glass, and 20 minutes later you're going to get another bottle because it's all vanished. We need to persuade people to drink more of it, because we do make it quite so well. And in your case, it's clearly, as with the others, but it's clearly a wine that you really believe in and really love to drink and celebrate.
I think what makes it a little bit different to the rest, it's made from Sauvignon Blanc. Majority of Noble Late Harvest in South Africa are Chenin Blanc. There are exceptions, there's Riesling, but we feel that being Sauvignon, which has a high natural acidity, it's a great wine.
Oh, we'll open it up. The colour already you can see, because normally that Noble Late Harvest or that dessert wine has got that thick, golden, viscous feel to it. This looks healthier, like I shall become a better person by drinking it and imbuing the essence of Nicky, which is really what this is.
I don't do the old brown sherry in the evening like the forefathers did, or my grandmother would have had a sherry, at 6 p.m. But I do steal the half bottles from the tasting room. And this, when I come through from the office, is my little pick-me-up in the evening. Little glass of the next Noble Late Harvest, and I even put a block of ice in it just to upset the purists. But it's your little kick. And you know what? When you finish a meal with a port, you end up with that high alcohol, and then you kind of wake up feeling the next morning that maybe you shouldn't have had that port. But a Noble Late Harvest tends to have a lower alcohol.
So this is the next Sauvignon Blanc Noble Late Harvest. It is a rarity in terms of being a late harvest from this particular grape. And although it looks kind of like what you would have seen with the first two, just a very nice pale white, not dissimilar, you can see the bottle there, to the Sauvignon Blanc, little flirt. Once you get the nose and get some on the palate, it is a remarkably different drink. And there isn't that overwhelming sticky sweetness that you get to a lot of the dessert wines. This does have a lightness to it.
I think that's the charm of this wine. It's not cloying, it's not syrupy sweet. Serve this with a gorgonzola or a Stilton or a Cremonzola, absolutely fabulous. And I tell people as well, you don't always need to serve it at the end of your meal. Because, you know, sometimes you get invited out on a Friday evening dinner party and you think, I need it like a hole in my head. But why not give this to them as a starter, as a little sugar kick early on in the evening? One of my most memorable pairings with this was at a restaurant in Durban. And they, you know, you get those Turkish figs from Woolies. They're sort of semi-dried, but you reconstitute it a bit. Stuff it with prosciutto, gorgonzola, wrap it with prosciutto ham and flash grill it. And there you have an absolute winner for a starter dinner party.
Oh.
And if you don't want to be that fancy, just melon and parma ham. Beautiful.
Perfect combination. It reminds me almost, I remember years ago, from some obscure country having a bottle of grapefruit liqueur, where you've got that nice citrus to it. It's still light. It's a beautiful combination, and it's the perfect way to wrap up what is always a lovely way to spend time, which is in company with the Wallaces and their wine. So thank you for making the trek up north and escaping the Elgin CBD for a couple of hours with us. And thank you for making some lovely wine and sharing it with us. It's wine, as you can see, that I thoroughly enjoy. A beautiful Sauvignon Blanc, the Chardonnay. Says a lot about where Chardonnay is in Elgin at the moment. It's an area to watch closely and to try if you haven't done so yet. The Braveheart, a lovely example of Pinot Noir from the area. This dessert wine is just delightful. And then for me, the highlight still is that Black Dog Malbec. If you happen to be in the area in broader Elgin, you're heading down to the Cape over the course of the coming summer, then getting out to visit Team Wallace, they'd love to see you. They've got some beautiful accommodation out there. And if you'd like to do something particularly special, they also do a wine and chocolate pairing where you can happily spend 3 or 4 hours indulging yourself very cheerfully indeed. So that's a selection for this week. If you're looking for great wine, head online to Pick n Pay. If you're not a member of the Pick n Pay Wine Club, make sure you join in. It's absolutely free of charge, great rewards, and a great opportunity to explore the world of wine, especially with plenty of wine to buy with Christmas coming. Team Wallace, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to many more wine with you both.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. Salute.
Cheers.